So, a quick update before we get into today's episode. We actually, since recording this, have started a process of migrating across to Canadian based and owned servers. The reason for this is this show is very authentic. I wasn't too sure when I brought up the whole can we move servers thing with Victor if I was going to be creating too much work for him. These are honest questions, and I didn't want to kind of insist on it or whatever. But because Victor was so keen on the idea, once we finished the episode, we were like, let's do it. And so we have. Anyway, I'll let past Paige take it from here. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the FediHost podcast, a show covering the challenges of building a new internet. I'm your FediHost host, Paige. With me, pretty much as always, is Victor Diot, our CTO.
I'm surprised you said my last name.
So that people can find you, Victor.
Oh, find me.
Disagree. Yeah, so they can track you down.
We should probably put my Mastodon handle.
That's a good point, Victor. We'll add that in the description as well. I should add it to my description template.
I think we just never discussed if I want it to be like more publicly facing. I don't mind. Like I say things sometimes. People can follow me if they want. Like Paige is not just FediHost. There's also somebody else behind it that's pretty technical. I don't know if people are like, is Paige like the whole company? Is he like a mastermind behind it? It's not just Paige.
That's good. I'm glad to see that you're worried that I'm stealing all the limelight.
The way I see it, I'd be like, oh, Paige is a YouTuber and he's offering hosting. Then I don't know. Like you don't know Paige's like hosting credentials, like how like tech savvy is Paige and stuff like that.
I'm so tech savvy. I built the whole FediHost platform from scratch myself.
From scratch.
Billing, customer management, all the DevOps. I translated it into French recently as well.
You poured your own silicone to make your computer chips.
That's right. Does deserve all the credit. No, I do find that funny. Should say, like, FediHost is a jointly owned by me and Victor that we started out of Quebec, and it is very much a shared thing that we do. There's no one else but us here.
But you are the face. You need to be the face. Like, who wouldn't want your face?
This is what people want. A New Zealand Canadian sweary man.
Speaking about your New Zealand Canadian heritage, today's topic is about geographical locations for hosting.
Victor, as you can see, is also an excellent host. He's picked up this skill set. So we're coming to you from, I don't know, a month into the trade war between Canada and the US. It stirred up a lot of questions. There's the obvious stuff, just Canadians being like, I want to make sure that I'm buying Canadian products and, desiring to do that. And also like Europeans and people who, are also being targeted, kind of asking questions about that sort of stuff. But there's also the more practical concerns, that being Canada has digital service taxes on American products. And with reciprocal taxes coming in, people could be facing really steep taxes buying our service from a certain country, or vice versa. We could be facing extremely steep taxes if we are purchasing a service in the US if Canada retaliates. Do you want to explain what our infrastructure is, basically, how it works?
So our infrastructure is a bunch of VPSs, so virtual private servers, from the same provider. It's from a smaller provider that offers pretty competitive prices, but it comes with the trade-off that we have to do more, but that's good for us because we're able to offer lower prices because of that. So right now it's a cluster of 4 servers, and everything lives on those 4 servers, and those 4 servers talk to each other, and they're hosted in a data center in New York.
And we set this all up before the trade war, obviously, and chose New York because it's a great location to have your first data center, right?
It's close to Montreal, it's close to us.
Connections across the North American continent are fast. The connections to Europe are fast. So it's geographically like a good location. And the reason that we didn't set up a cluster of servers in New York, Berlin, Toronto, Sydney is, I think, fairly obvious. We want to have the number of customers that would justify the number of servers. So you need some number of Australians saying, oh, we'd like a Sydney server before it would make sense to have a server sitting in Sydney?
Our infrastructure basically as a base cost for wherever we do decide to set ourselves up. So if we were, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but if we were to have a European server, we would need a certain amount of things that we need to set up in place that would add to the cost of our whole operation that isn't necessarily justified with the size of like our company right now.
I mean, it's an overhead, right? It's like, you know, when do you actually rent the office in Sydney? Well, you need to have some employees wanting that office first. Otherwise, you're just paying, you know, rent for a box with no one in it. So that's the main thing. And I was curious. I mean, I don't know these details. This is like me finding out for the first time too. If I said, Victor, like, oh man, someone's sent me an email and they've said they want to get 3 huge Mastodon instances, but it has to be hosted in Europe somewhere. How hard is it for you to spin that up?
If we like take cost aside and we just focus on like the technical aspect of it, well, first of all, like our website would need to be able to handle saying, well, this person needs to be on the European servers, this person needs to be in America. Like they would need a way to select which region the person needs to be installed in. That's not something that we have built in our code.
That would be kind of, you go create Mastodon instance and you go choose location and you're like, Berlin or New York.
Yeah, you would need to be able to say where, in which like cluster of our infrastructure you want to be in. And then there's multiple ways to go about it. So internally, we use Kubernetes to manage everything. So non-tech savvy people don't need to know anything about that. But the thing we're using would be able to talk to different machines on different geographical locations. So right now, everything's living on the same data server, and and our servers are talking to themselves through an internal network. So that means bandwidth isn't monitored because it's all internal. So you don't have the cost of external bandwidth. So as soon as we add a separate infrastructure in a different location, then you start having to think about metered bandwidth where servers talk to each other from different data centers, and now that's starting to be metered. So do you have one large cluster that's multi-region, or you create new clusters for every region? And these things are independent, with the website kind of being the master routing everything to different clusters. There's trade-off with each different ways of doing it. So if you do have one large kind of thing that's multi-region, you have one configuration. So like if you're doing configuration changes, you don't have to worry too much about keeping different clusters in sync with each other. So the keeping in sync part, it wouldn't be that big of an issue, but there's like an overhead to keeping those different infrastructures in sync. So right now, since we just have one thing, if I want to push like a hotfix, then I can do it quite easily. But as you start growing and having multiple of the same thing in different regions, then you don't want to do these hotfixes. You want to be able to guarantee that everything is always working in sync. It's basically what we're doing with the hosting that we provide for like Mastodon PeerTube. We never do anything manual. Like everybody's always running the same thing. Like all configurations are the same thing, except the configuration changes that you get depending on which tier of like a Mastodon instance or PeerTube that you're buying. But it's fully automated. There's like, I'm never touching this manually. This
is what you call infrastructure as code, right?
Yeah. As you start having more clusters, that becomes like even more important.
So like what I'm hearing is that there's this kind of like very obvious to the user thing that you need to do. Like you need to probably spend at least two weeks kind of working on literally the website's user interface and database, and then probably another 2 weeks of bug testing, coming back and making sure that's all working. And then it sounds to me like a very mentally taxing kind of thinking through how to set up the second cluster and probably debugging it and maybe going like, that was a bit of a dead end. No, that won't work. We should try this instead. To me, it sounds like a lot of work, you know?
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's also, yeah, like I think you touched up on it a bit, is also the mental load of managing. At some point, like my brain cannot fit all this responsibility for me myself alone, right?
Well, I mean, it feels like that now because you're having to learn a lot. I think I should emphasize to the viewers, you know, the Fediverse is a new thing and it's new to us as well. And, you know, once you have worked with something for years, things that were really hard and you had to remind yourself, oh, don't forget this, do become second nature. But there just simply hasn't been enough time for a lot of stuff to become extremely easy. You know, just, oh yeah, Mastodon works like this. Oh yeah, the cache, it's key to this. You know, that sort of stuff, right?
There's a lot of moving parts to a Mastodon server. The more parts that you add to something, the more chances of it's going to break.
Yeah. The thing is, we do want to do this. It is a thing, like as the company grows, that will be necessary.
Yeah, I think from day one, it's always been like, of course, we're going to have different locations.
So something we were going to, an offer that we want to make to customers is that if you're a person who would like to have your server hosted elsewhere, eventually send us an email. If you send an email to support@FediHost and say, I'm setting up an account and I understand that for now it's in this geography, but in future, when you offer it, I would like to have this on the European server or the Japanese server or wherever it ends up being, we will, for free, move that account to that server for you when that time comes. And in sending us that email, you let us know which location we should look to set up our next cluster of servers. So it is just a matter of time, provided we keep gaining customers and have enough customers to justify it, basically. The next stage is the actual hosting company themselves. And this, I think, is more closely related to the trade war element. If there is a tariff or there is some sort of who knows what's going to happen, you know, in 4 or 5 years situation between Canada and the United States, how much more work is it to move off a hosting provider that is American?
It's a substantial work. It could be a couple days, it could be a week. I don't see it being longer than 2 weeks. That's like worst case scenario, but being able to find a provider that's affordable, I think is going to be the big challenge. And I actually think if we did have to move our hosting somewhere else, it would actually kind of make sense to look into maybe having our own like servers that we buy physically that we co-locate somewhere and that we handle ourselves.
Would it make sense if that were to be the case to say if our second cluster of servers are, say, in Berlin or whatever, or going to be somewhere in Europe, rather than going with our existing hosting company, that would be the time to create a new account with a new hosting company there?
I think we would have to look at what the options are available to us. Our current hosting provider has locations in Japan, in the EU also. I think they're based in Florida, but who knows in the future? Like, I don't think they would appreciate losing business because there's tariffs. So they might move their company somewhere else. I don't even think the owners are American themselves. So like, but I think it's I don't think having to move somewhere else or the next, like, do we stick with the same provider? They're not deal breakers, but I think as we grow, our options are gonna grow also, right?
One other thing I was wondering, you know, like I myself kind of looked around at various hosting providers. I was like, what's the price range? It's quite hard to compare them because the way they do it is they'll be like, it's 4 cores and 4 gigs of RAM and blah. But they're often not kind of like, they're not a comparable thing with exactly the same stuff. So what sort of price differences are out there for large VPS providers?
The hosting provider that we have right now gives you a crazy amount of RAM. And for hosting Mastodon, for hosting PeerTube, for hosting many things on the same servers, it's kind of a really, really good deal for us. And when you look at other prices for other providers, they're not even competitive. I don't think I could justify going with them for most of them because they just don't offer enough RAM. We kind of have this specialized use case that I don't think many VPS providers cater to,
Mm-hmm.
because I think they're mostly targeting companies that want to host or just one website, like their company website or their company infrastructure, where we're hosting infrastructure for like many different people. It's not just a website that you sign up to and then that's the service. Everybody is hosting their own website. So
Mm-hmm.
you need this capacity, and I think the only other providers that could give that is if you go with the big cloud providers like AWS, and the prices are just, they're a complete different ballpark than what we're talking about. So that's why I'm thinking if we ever do need to shop around and as we get bigger, I think the option would be to buy dedicated servers or rent fully like huge boxes from
A
whatever
data
the
center
yeah, whatever
in
those
wherever.
companies that do sell hosting, like VPS hosting. We would have to go see them and be like, we want to rent servers from whoever these guys are renting from. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a name I see a lot is like Equinix, and I think Equinix has like data centers around the world. And I think they do provide like hosting for large machines for people who basically they know what they're doing and they want to be like really close to the metal. I think that's the option that we will have to go to in the future.
Yeah. Although having said that, that certainly adds to your burden of things that you have to keep in your head, right?
Yeah.
I mean, would you be open to this putting out a kind of a call out to hosting providers who are Canadian who do have a server farm, you know, or actually do have servers, and saying if you can price match, we are interested because we are
Absolutely.
Canadians
Yeah.
and we would like, in solidarity and also just practically, would like to be keeping the money in the country and having the server down the street where we can keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because I think, yeah, again, as we grow, like our purchasing power increases. And like right now we're using basically consumer like services, right? Services that anybody can have access to. But as we get bigger, we get this kind of bargaining chip where we can go like, look, now we want to have a business to business conversation. Like
Mm-hmm.
let's make this work together.
Yeah, and it would be nice to be able to say work with a local or work with a partner who's
Yeah.
taking care of like the bare metal and that kind of lower layer, so that we can focus on you know the services running on top of it,
Yeah.
and work with that person, work with that company as we grow. And I think it would be a lot easier if they were people that we could actually meet up with every once in a while and actually know, rather than a
I
company in Florida.
Yeah, I'd be like really excited to be able to say, look, we're ditching the servers in New York. Now we're actually hosted in Montreal. Like
Hmm.
that would be like super fun to me.
You could go in and see our box, be like, there it
Yeah,
is.
this is our server. I physically touch it.
That would get you to come drop by from Mount Tremblant a little bit more.
Yeah.
Gotta go see the baby. Okay, cool. So that's an official call out. If you are a Montreal or Canadian at least based host, and you think that you might be able to compete on price or offer us something there, please reach out. We're very interested in partnering with an organization
Absolutely.
that sounds like that. Obviously, bonus points if you're also offering hosting in other countries so that we can stick with you
Yeah.
throughout. You wouldn't want a host that was like, oh, we've only got a Montreal data center and that's it.
I mean, I think that would be okay. I'm sure we can call up data centers and be like, who do we talk to get the good deals?
And Montreal's pretty well located to cover most of
Electricity
your
is
needs.
cheap. Yeah.
Cheap electricity and
Yeah.
plentiful.
Yeah.
Because I think there might be some excess fairly soon. Some people may not realize on the Fediverse, the location of a server isn't as important as maybe some other services or websites in the past, right?
Yeah. So Mastodon, whenever you do a post, the person's who's seeing your post, if they're not on your server, they're gonna see the post being served from their server. So if you're in Montreal and if your instance is in Montreal, but somebody in Australia sees your post, then it's gonna be served like their instance is gonna have fetched the post, and
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be served from Australia. So
Mastodon.social.au.
so it's going to be served from very close to them. And if that's not the case, then at FediHost we do like all the medias are served from a CDN. It means a content delivery network. It's companies that offer these services have servers in multiple different locations, and whenever you post an image, it gets sent out, like it spreads out all across the world so that whoever's accessing the image that you've just posted gets it from very close to them, so there's little latency. The only time where your server's geographical location matters is when you're going to be making posts and stuff like that. The interactions with the server itself might be a
Mm-hmm.
little bit slower. I guess it's really hard for me to say if that actually still matters. It probably does, but I don't remember the last time I've been like, oh, this server is really slow. Oh, it's because it's on the other side of a planet. I think latency overall in the world has gone down pretty significantly.
Yeah, I mean, the experience of using Mastodon for me is like 90% of the time on an app on my phone. And it's like asynchronously pulling in
Yeah.
posts and data and stuff. So you open it up and you've got 7 notifications and you read those and you reply a little bit. It's not a kind of like a in the moment 1 second delay. It fetching stuff
Yeah.
is not a big issue.
Mhm.
You know, you don't browse on Mastodon that much. You're not like hunting for stuff on the app that much. You're kind of just reading your feed, seeing what the people you've followed have said, right?
And if we're talking about PeerTube, again, the videos are served from the CDN. So anybody who's watching a PeerTube video on your instance is going to get the data served from pretty close to their location, or at least like a very reasonable distance from their location. Like, I don't even think it really matters for the videos you're uploading, because I mean, you would get latency on your upload, but if the upload is started, so it keeps going, right? So even if there's latency in your upload, maybe it just means that instead of taking a minute, it's going to take a minute and 10 seconds for the first round trip or something.
And then the important thing, of course, to say with PeerTube is that it literally has peer-to-peer viewing in it. So if you are in Australia and you're watching a PeerTube video that's become popular and lots of people in Australia want to watch it, but it's hosted on a FediHost server, you know, in North America. The other people watching a video are going to be sharing the video with you. That's going to do a lot to reduce the kind of any bandwidth delays that are going on.
And the peer-to-peer aspect of PeerTube works very well.
Yeah.
The videos on video.videos, like this podcast and everything, like they've picked up traction, and they're quite, like they can be quite big, like a gig each. And when you look at the bandwidth usage of like the data we're serving, that is not reflected. Like it's a lot smaller than if we were serving everything. So I think as people watch the videos and when you first post them, people are like, the data from the videos is mostly being shared by other people.
Ça fonctionne bien, Chocobos.
Ça fonctionne très bien.
So I hope that this explains to people, you know, has helped you understand like why things are the way they are. And yeah, like the messages, we hear you and we would love to do that too. And, you know, hopefully if things go well, that's something that we'll be able to offer people. If you sign up for FediHost and we grow, you will have the option to have your hosting in other locations.
We're prepared for any eventualities that might arise in the current political climate.
Yeah. Are you guys prepared for the consequences of the geopolitical situation? We are Canadians. Yes.
Yes.
we are very, very much watching the situation about as closely as is possible. So don't worry about it. I guarantee that if you're concerned about it, we are 10x
Yeah.
that. Okay, so thanks for listening and watching out there on the Fediverse or on YouTube if you're watching this a little bit delayed. Yeah, leave a comment if that's of interest to you. Actually, if you're the sort of person who thinks they might want to start an instance, why don't you drop a comment below letting us know where your ideal geography would be? That'd be an interesting thing to see, where everyone is located. And yeah, if you start a instance with FediHost and you think you'd like to access a server move in future, just send us that support email so that we can add a note to your account saying that you'd get a free credit for a move if you'd like that. Other than that, thanks for joining me again this week, Victor.
My pleasure.
And thanks, everyone. We'll see you out there on the Fediverse.